the October 21st Board of Public Works meeting, starting with invocation. Oh, you're right. Thank you. Starting with the invocation. Lord, we're meeting today to conduct matters of business, guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness. Right, though in speech, impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. In your name, amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. As I understand, Bill is not going to be here, but we still do have a quorum, thankfully. So do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda for September?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Don't have any listed comments from the audience. Anybody want to be impromptu? Okay. And starting with Darren's general manager report.
All right, I've just got a couple of items. Number one, I want to talk about the lead and copper rule. And the main reason I want to talk about that today is because there is a lead and copper rule I, which is the improvements to lead and copper rule. And part of this we're going to, and it was approved on October 8th. So just earlier this month, this finally has come to fruition. And the other thing I want to bring to your attention is exactly what Kelly just turned over, that very first piece of paper right in front of you. We have the responsibility, because of the LCRR, which was approved in 2021, is now active today. We have to send a letter out to all of our customers. The lead and copper rule, there has been 3 iterations. It started in 1991. In 1991, we have to test for lead in service lines. Now, one of the things I want to make as crystal clear as I possibly can is that this is really a measure of the lead that is in your own home. The water that is going through our water mains, we've done many, many tests for lead, and it for decades has come out as non-detect or ND. It's not there. But what happens is that water, as it gets to your home, and if you have lead pipes or lead fittings in your home, when that water sits there, if that water is either has a corrosivity level that is high or a pH that is high or any other chemical reaction that might occur, that water can then leach the lead out of those lines, out of those fittings, and then it comes into your water. This became very clear a few years ago in Flint, Michigan. And what happened in Flint, Michigan is they changed their water source. They went from the Great Lakes to a different lake. And when they brought that water in, that corrosivity level was different, the pH was different, the chemical makeup was different, and it began to leach out the lead out of those lead service lines. Now, there are a lot of lead service lines in Hannibal. Anything that was built before 1986, we have a high confidence that there's probably a lead service line there. But we have been providing water at a high pH, at a low corrosivity level, to where we've had very few, if none, of the problems with lead. One of the things that these rules did, so in 1991, the LCR, lead and copper rule, came out. We've been testing when we would test an individual home, it was tested down to 15 parts per billion. That's how close we're looking at this. In the next year, in 2021, the LCRR came about, and a couple of things happened there. Number one, we had to do an inventory. That inventory had to be turned in by October 16th, 2024. We turned ours in on August 24th, 2024. So we are meeting all the requirements. What we did is we've gone back and looked historically at blue cut sheets. And if we don't know, then the rule automatically says, if you don't know what's in the ground, it's considered lead. We now have to write a letter to every single one of the people that we think is either has a lead line, might have a lead line, or might have a galvanized line that needs to be replaced. What you have is a copy of the letter. It's going to be we're going to have the correct addresses put into place. We're going to inform people. All of the language that's on the second page is required by the LCRR rule. Not a single word have we changed. Sometimes the people that enforce those rules, if you've changed anything, and we're not, we're being absolutely to the letter of the law. So this is going to be going out. We're working hard to make sure it gets out on time. It has to be done by November 15th. And so these letters are going out to everyone. And so some people may say, I've already changed it. Well, one of the things about Hannibal here is the customer owns everything from the main to the home. And that's what we're trying to replace. Now, if there's been a leak, they may have gone in and spliced it out, taken out the chunk that's bad, put it back in. They may be able to have some PVC pipe from here to here. But if there's any lead all the way from the main, which there might be a lead gooseneck, then there's a lead line that goes to the meter, from the meter to the home, into the home. If any of that is lead, we have to report it as lead. Now,
Does the customer own again? From the main to the home?
from the main to the home.
Okay.
That's the ownership of the property owner. Now, the other part of this is they're trying to get all lead lines out of service within 10 years. That's according to the LCRI rule. Now, it takes about 3 years for that rule to come into play. So the LCRR came in. Now we're waiting for the LCRI, and then there's going to be a 10-year period in which all lead lines have to be removed. We have questions. We still have questions. Let me read you the final comment from the AWWA. It's the last paragraph in my report under lead and copper. The HBPW is in the process of creating an LCR compliance plan that will lay out how we plan on accomplishing these new regulatory requirements. There are still questions that need clarification, as described by the statement from the American Water Works Association. As we review the technical details of the lengthy rule, we anticipate there will be challenges to overcome. For example, in many communities, lead service lines are partly on private property and owned by the property owner rather than the utility. The new rule requires water utilities to replace service lines under their control. We share EPA's desire to remove lead service lines in their entirety. However, this portion of the rule needs further explanation to assure water utilities are operating within their legal authority. So there's things we're going to explore. Is this something that perhaps we take and we offer a loan to individuals so that they can go in and replace that service line on their own? There has been monies set apart. So the federal government put about $4.5 billion out for lead and copper specifically. The state of Missouri got about $44 million worth. Of that, 50% of it is earmarked for underserved, environmentally disadvantaged communities. We do not qualify for that. So that leaves $22 million for the rest. If we have about 6,000 services that need to be done, and each one costs just $5,000 a piece, that's $30 million right there. So I think we're not going to get a lot of assistance from the federal government. We have a lot of things to think about. We believe that there's still some legal things going on to be able to determine how do you force a private citizen to be able to do that on their property, on what's something that they own. So there's some serious questions that yet have to be defined and overcome before we really move forward. Now, again, it's a 10-year period, but it doesn't start for 3. So in 2027 is when it'll really start in earnest. But we're going to be talking about it, and we'll be bringing it back to you at least with some ideas of what that lead and copper rule policy for us is going to look like. And we're going to be watching the industry carefully. Any other questions?
When does this have to be sent out by? Is it regulated by the government?
The letter has to be sent out by November 15th. So we're working on that furiously right now to make sure, and it'll cost us, we anticipate about 6,000 letters going out. It's about $1 a piece.
So we have the data for what the board owns that's currently not in compliance, but we don't have the homeowner data.
So very little of what we own is out of compliance.
But we know, that's what I'm saying, that's what you turned in August, right?
So that inventory is all of this, our 8,270 meters roughly. Each one of those properties, we've either identified as lead, identified as not lead, galvanized, or unknown. And we went through the cut sheets, all the blue sheets for each one of those, and identified it. So we know that 2,000 of them are clean. Those people will not get a letter, okay? So that's not going to them. The other roughly 6,000, we're going to send a letter. And that's the letter that we've crafted. And there's going to be a tick. It's either lead, we know it's lead, galvanized, we know it's galvanized, or unknown, assume it's lead. So that's what we're sending them.
So the homeowner doesn't have to do any additional testing on
No.
their lines?
So we take and test approximately 30 to 35 homes every 3 years, according to the rule. And what happens is they take and we ask those people, okay, you don't use your bathroom or any of your water overnight. In the morning, they draw from the sink inside the house the first liter of water. We then take that and we send it off. And we took those samples about a month and a half ago. We anticipate that information back. They're testing each one of them to that now 10 parts per billion MCL, maximum contaminant level. If any of them hit above that 10, we report that. If more than 3 of them go above that, we have to tell that to everybody. So this reporting is, we do it. We have high confidence. Like I said, it's a measure of our water corrosivity. We know what that is. We have high confidence that we won't have an issue, but we will report that. And we do report that every single year in our CCR, the Consumer Confidence Report, which is required by law that we provide to the community. And it's available on our website.
Thank you.
You bet. Good questions.
I was reading something about the testing process where leader number 1 was tested and then leader number 5. Is that the process you're talking about?
That's the new process. So that's part of this LCRI rule that they're going to be testing that. And so what they're looking at is they believe that they're testing, and they are, the very right from the sink, the plumbing that's from the sink to probably the middle of the house. By hitting the 5th liter, you're hitting that water that was probably out in that service line, so it's a little more accurate of what's inside that home. So, yeah, very good. The other thing that they also tightened up on is if there's any positive, we have to do sampling on a 6-month basis. We have to provide filters. There's a lot of things that fall into that rule. So there's more than what I have shared, but it's absolutely available. EPA rules, EPA, lead and copper, all of those things. You can go to those, search it out, and it's all available.
I saw on the news this is happening all over too.
Nationwide,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And there's some new testing now that seems to be easier, but it's quite expensive, it sounds like.
Yes, yes. And if people are interested, they can actually go. There's kits from Lowe's there's some kits that you can do for your own home, your own testing.
Are we being proactive at this point for funding to set money aside already for this, or?
So the big question is, how much are we going to, so again, those service lines are the customers. Do we have that responsibility? And that's a question for you as the board. It's going to be, that's something we're going to.
Oh, all of it, all 6,000 lines?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought it was just a few here and there that we
No,
were.
every single,
Okay.
so we are responsible, we own all the mains,
Right, okay,
but every one of those service lines, we require the customer to put them in from that main to the home, and it's theirs.
okay.
And so, as the government says we've got to help, that's got to be defined. It's got to be defined much more thoroughly. And so to what is our financial requirement? How can we do that? Is it, like I said, if we're required to do some sort of help, could it be we go to the state and get a state revolving fund loan, use that, lend it, take and use that to kind of refurbish? Anyways, that would be a huge, huge lift for us in the office and all of those things. But all of these things are going to require some work. But we're going to work on that plan. And if you have ideas, we're interested.
Great, thanks.
Has it gotten down to the end result after 10 years? It's not done because the resident refuses to let anybody on their property?
That's kind of a question for the attorneys. So if I come to you and I say, all right, you've got a lead line, you must do this, and you say, no, I don't, I'm willing to sign a waiver. Can the attorneys come up with a document that lets them waiver it that I can then give to the federal government? The federal government accepts that as okay. That's a question.
Or is the federal government going to tell you you can't provide service to them?
Correct.
Until they
Correct.
comply.
And these are all just questions. We do not have any idea what that might be. But there's people that have been pushing that very thing, wanting to say, look, I'm a citizen, I have the right to say no. Do we have the right to override that? It gets pretty sticky. So we're gonna kind of also watch and see. This is one of those you don't want to be the pioneer. And so we're going to kind of see what others develop and how who's doing it best and how it works best. So, all right, second part on this, we've got in the audience today, we've got Greg Benton of the union, for the electric union. We've got Ben and JB here. But I've got the kind of a report on the mutual aid response. Very quickly, this year we've had pretty active. Down in, first, we started off in September 11th with Hurricane Francine. We sent a group down, and they ended up going to Plaquemine, Louisiana. I believe that's I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Plaquemine, all right. I don't know, I'm not a local. All right, good enough. How do you say it quicker? Plaquemine, okay, that's how it is. Louisiana. They came home. It was a crew of 5. Then we went to Hurricane Helene. They went down to Florida. They worked there in Tallahassee for a bit, and then they ended up in Easley, South Carolina for another 7 days, and that was pretty brutal. They did a great job. One of the things that's nice is that our guys are actually pretty well sought after. They have the reputation of knowing what they're doing. They're skilled, they're safe, and they do a very good job. And then finally, we had Hurricane Milton, which came through, and another crew went there again to the Orlando area. We've been there several times, and so our guys kind of know it a little bit, know the systems, but that still put them out in the backwoods, and they did a lot of work there. Worked hard, come home, and been safe. One of the things I want that everybody needs to know is that all of their time, all of the travel, and all of the vehicles, there's a pay for that, and we're being made even, okay? So we're not making a whole bunch of money on this at all. We're breaking even, but it is not a cost to the citizens of Hannibal. So that needs to be, I just want to make that very clear. And that ends my report.
All right, do you have any questions or observations about Darren's report? Okay, thank you very much. And moving right along, Gunslinger for operations, please.
Good afternoon. Start off with the electric side of things. Our reliability went up 1,000th this month. Again, it's a 12-month rolling average, so something dropped off. You do see that we had a total of 20 outages this past month, mainly related to squirrels or birds. So again, we're continuing to work on getting those squirrel guards or animal guards installed. We put in about 70 this past month. Continue to work with the contractor on the 3rd Street viaduct. As they're placing concrete or moving the girders and stuff, we had to shut lines off and reroute some electricity. As part of that, we also put a circuit underground under the viaduct. And that was completed last month with the help of the sewer crew, I believe, did the digging, and the line crew came back and pulled the wire and stuff in. Darren already discussed the storm response. If we go to the water side of things, you look like we're pretty close to what we have been in the past years as far as water plant production. We did have exchange vessels 3 and 4 with the GAC. Continued the rehabilitation of filter number 3 of the gravity filter. And then we also tried to sanitize one of the GAC vessels. We've seen with the, I don't know if it's related to the flooding event we had earlier this year, elevated levels in our GAC tank or vessels quicker than we have in the past. And so there's a sanitation process using sodium hydroxide that goes in and oxidizes all that, and then you back flush that out. And so we attempted to do that with limited results at this point. We're going to look and maybe try it again in the coming weeks. Water distribution side of things, we replaced about 620 feet of 2-inch main down on Ely Street. That is a line that kind of runs back off in the woods, and we've developed quite a few leaks on it over the past years, and so we elected to go ahead and get that replaced while we were able to get in there and cross that off the list. We also continued to operate valves as part of a valve exercising program. Again, we don't want to be out in the middle of the night trying to shut water off and come upon a valve that is broke or whatnot. So you will see as we get through this program, us digging up more and more valves and getting them replaced with new operable valves so that we're able to meet the needs of our customers and shut water off when we need to. With it being a really dry month, you can see that in our, it's really reflected in our wastewater treatment plant flow. Our flow average for the month was only 2.7 million gallons a day. If you look back, September of 23, which was fairly dry, and we were at almost 2.9 there. So again, just evident of how much I&I or groundwater enters the system. Some big projects going on there as we finished up the rehabilitation of Clarifier 3. That we went in and they blasted all the metal components and painted it. They also coated the vertical concrete walls where the actual cement was being ate out of it, and the aggregate was exposed. So they went in there and rebuilt that as best they could with a filler, and then coated it and with a slick polyurea coating, and so it'll aid in the maintenance of it as we move forward. Wastewater collection side of things, continued our months of 0 SSOs, and then we focused on raising manholes. Every year the street department goes out and paves, and in the past we've tried to raise the manholes prior to the paving, and I don't know if it's the paving operation is, I mean, it's not just something that the city does, it's something that contractors have a hard time hitting that elevation perfect. So it gives a undesirable ride when you drive over it with a vehicle. So what we've done for the past few years is we'll let the street department pave what they need to pave. We'll come back in later in the year, cut those manholes out and bring them up to grade where it provides a smoother driving surface. So the guys are wrapping that up here, hopefully either this week or next week. So, and then we continued our technology upgrades, wastewater treatment plant, water treatment plant. Those systems have been in use for about 10 years now, and technology's changed quite a bit. And so we're working to streamline that process and working with our vendors to do that. That's what I've got on the operations report, unless you all have any questions.
I don't. You guys have anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, if you move on to projects, then thank you.
All right. Gravity filters at the water plant. Again, they were working on filter 3. I heard this morning that filter 3 is back up in operation and operating correctly. They'll have this week off, and then the following week they'll take filter 4 out of service. That's just due to availability of the workforce that they've contracted to come in and remove the existing filter. Hopefully the plan is to have it completed by the end of November and everything up and operating by December 1. Water loss is something big that we're continuing to monitor. We're working with Eden Brothers, and I got a stack of papers here of all the different parameters that we're monitoring. Again, we're looking to develop trends. We've done acoustic listening or acoustic water leak detection last year with an outfit that went and looked at all of our valves. We had a gentleman in town, like we have in the past, that goes through and listens for about a week or so in the June, July timeframe. They're not finding any large leaks, so we're looking to try to track down, verify the accuracy of the meters leaving the plant and some of the meters out in the system. So that's something we're continuing to work on. One thing we've got in works is we're trying to get some inline meters put at a couple of key locations that do not have meters. And we're just working with the vendors to get the vaults, the concrete vaults that we're going to put in the ground made. And then we're getting equipment so that we get that meter installed at the proper elevation within that pipe. And so we get the most accurate reading. Hopefully that equipment comes in here within the next week or so and we can begin that installation. Downtown SSO elimination project, that's the one where we've been working on lining all the 15-inch diameter and smaller sewer mains this year, located outside the flood wall. That was completed in early August, and so, or in August, and so now we're planning to go back and do all the mains that are 15-inch diameter and larger. I'm not sure if it'll work out next summer's schedule, or I wish we were doing it right now with the low groundwater table, but clarifier rehab is complete. North Street storm sewer, the contractor, due to various reasons, has not been able to be on site. They did move in a piece of equipment this weekend, and I saw it sitting there today. I wasn't able to make contact with them, but they're hoping to get this completed by the end of the year. So, and then we're phase 2 is bidding out. I think it's next Tuesday, the 29th. And so that'll go before council on the first meeting in November. And in phase 3, that's the one that was awarded allotment, and we're working with the Corps of Engineers on that time frame. And last schedule I saw, maybe into May, into June of next year is when that will go out to bid. So Bear Creek Dam spillway improvements, that's out to bid. And bid date is November 18th. And so we'll work with the engineer on that. It may require a special meeting just to meet the ARPA timeframes set aside by the state. Indian Mountain Substation, we'll talk about the installation contract a little later in the meeting, but we're continuing to receive materials. The transformer's been delayed a little bit on delivery just from the remnants of Hurricane Helene. It screwed up roads and travel routes, and their focus has been on other areas. So when they get that shipped, it'll go to a storage yard in St. Louis until we're ready to receive it, hopefully in May or April, or March or April of next year. So and that's all I've got, unless y'all have any questions on the projects report.
Nope. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Paul, if you could get the financial report, please.
All right. Let's jump into the financials for September. So total cash was down, if we start on the balance sheet, by about $617,000 from last month. We do, like Matt mentioned, continue on with our capital projects in the water and sewer funds. And then we did begin paying the higher capacity costs in the electric fund. And so those items led to that reduction in cash. The only other significant change was a decrease in payables. Utility-wide, total assets are down just slightly from a month ago and down about 3% from a year ago. Moving on to the P&L, the income statement for September. Utility-wide, we did have a net income that came in about $267,000 more than budgeted. Specifically, the electric fund did come in right at budget. Purchase power costs were $222,000 less, but revenues came in right at budget. We did have about a $497,000 net loss, but that was less than what we had budgeted in the electric fund. On the water fund, revenues were higher than budget, but operating expenses were about $84,000 more, and that was due to the carbon changeout expense. That's a $107,000 expense every time we do that, and so that was recognized during September. So the net income in that fund was $42,000 less than what we had budgeted. The sewer fund had a positive month financially, and it had a net income about $44,000 better than budget. So looking back a year ago and comparing that to last year, just like we saw last month, financial results were better this year than last. The electric fund did have the slightly lower purchase power cost, and kilowatt hour sales remained pretty consistent compared to last year. The water fund, though, sold about 10 million more gallons this year than last, which resulted in revenues that were about 9% higher this year. That increase, though, was offset by that carbon change out, and so net income was actually $54,000 less than the year before. The sewer fund did have a much better year, obviously selling more gallons in water correlated with the sewer fund, and so we had revenues that came in 13% higher than last year. So we're now a quarter of the way through our fiscal year, and just like we did last month, we are showing two different year-to-date income statements. The first shows our purchase power capacity that we've actually paid for this far into our fiscal year. The second shows the full year's worth of capacity amortized evenly for the first 3 months of the year. And so we think that that second one that's amortized is a bit more accurate, as we are locked into having to pay that capacity no matter what. And so if we use that income statement, the electric fund is right at budget so far this fiscal year. The lower purchase power costs, primarily due to energy, those are being offset by a little bit higher operating expenses. The main reason for that is labor, with some of the crews that have went and worked some extra overtime on the hurricane relief. We do have a bit elevated labor costs, but like Darren mentioned, those will be reimbursed and offset once those payments come in from those utilities. The water fund.
How long does it take usually for those to come in?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. So the first one we've already been paid for when we went to Louisiana, Hurricane Francine. Milton and Helene will be a bit longer because those were FEMA disasters, and so those typically take a little bit longer. Obviously, more utilities helping. So the last time we had a FEMA declared hurricane, it was closer to, I want to say, 90 days.
It's only
We'll
about
see
3
that.
months for it to come out and catch up.
Yeah. The water fund does remain a little bit behind budget. We've seen higher chemical and maintenance costs in that fund, and pretty much the same is true for the sewer fund. Looking back a year ago, this year, utility-wide, our net income is up by about $876,000, and operating revenues specifically are about 7% more. Obviously, that's due to the rate increase in both electric and water that we did a year ago, and then net purchase power is about $299,000 less so far this fiscal year. We then have our check register, which shows all the payments that we made in September, our credit card statement, which shows all the purchases that we used a credit card for, cash reserves and targets for all of the funds, and then our investment listing. You will see some investments that we're starting to roll off and let mature. Obviously, with the back-to-back months of cash coming down, we're starting to let those mature so that we can replenish our operating funds. We are very fortunate to have our investments laddered to where we have 3 or 4 usually coming due every month for that very reason, so that we're able to pay for some of these higher costs that are coming in. The dashboard, if you turn your attention to page 23, about halfway down, our debt service coverage ratio, we're showing for the electric fund is at 3.01. That is based on actual capacity, if we use the amortized capacity, like I mentioned before, that debt service coverage ratio is a negative 0.93, showing the full year's worth of capacity amortized over 3 months. The water fund has a slight decrease at 1.46, and then the sewer fund is healthy at a 4.4 debt coverage ratio. Just a bit farther down, we continue to see significant increases in our subscribers to Smart Hub and paperless billing customers, and so we continue to applaud the efforts of our customer service team in pushing more and more people to sign up for paperless billing. Obviously, we save significantly on postage and things like that, and so we continue to encourage you as a board to let your constituents know to do that, and we appreciate it. The audit is moving right along. We have submitted all information. We're doing some wrap-up reporting items, and then we're just waiting on our GASB 75 calculations and then our loggers calculations that come back from the actuary. Once we receive those, we do anticipate receiving a draft of the audit, and again, we'll have Williams Keepers on site in November to present that draft to you all at that meeting. But we do hope to get it sooner so you can have some time to review it. I think that does it, unless anybody has any questions for me.
It's a lot of obvious gymnastics when you're trying to compare cash accounting to what you expect to accrue later. So I respect the difficulty in providing this kind of stuff. Anybody have any questions of Paul? I don't think so. That wraps it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Matt Munslinger with unfinished business on Indian Mounds.
Later in September, we went out for the installation contract of all the equipment that we've been purchasing over the last 18 months for the Indian Mounds substation replacement. Just to give you a little bit of history, that substation was installed in the 1970s. A lot of the switches and breakers, we tried to get them replaced or repaired as best we can. They're no longer functional, no longer able to be repaired. And so I'm going to say maybe 2015 or 2017, they started down the process of trying to acquire a site for the new substation to be located, allowing the existing Indian Mounds substation to be in service while the new one was constructed. And then we happened upon Ameren moving their line and us moving our tie line, so that kind of took center stage for a number of years. And so once that 161 project was complete, we shifted our focus back to this project. This is one of the projects that we went and secured that electrical lease for to pay for a portion of this project, with the remaining coming out of reserves. And so again, back in the spring of 2013, we went out and purchased the 34.5 to 13.8 transformer because it was the longest lead time item. Since that time, we've kind of worked our way backwards. What was the next longest lead time item? Let's go ahead and purchase that. And so we've got all the components purchased on their way. We've got roughly $2.3 million in materials completed into this project. And so we went out to bid on September 26th. We've got 2 contractors that placed bids on the installation contract. The low being a bid just over $2.6 million from L.E. Myers. After reviewing their qualifications, they had previously done work for us back, I'm going to say 2007, 2008 timeframe. They did the west tie line from Ameren into the new West 161 substation and some other stuff in town. So we have historical experience with them. I know it's been 16 years, but we do have a tie to that company. They do a good job, and so it's the recommendation of our engineer and also our staff that we award this contract to L.E. Myers for the Indian Mounds Substation installation contract.
It's interesting that they came so close together. Is that something we need to vote on?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
And a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we need roll call? No. Nope.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Just also, so you know, 2.3, we have about 2.3 million left in that lease loan. And that's what's gonna go directly to that, so 300,000 of that's gonna come from our reserve fund. So, let that be clear.
Okay. All right, do we have any comments from the city attorney?
No.
None. Okay. Any general discussion? Having heard none, I guess I'm looking for a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
And do you have a list of everybody?
Oh,
It's on yours.
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, it's over here.
Can you go ahead and make the motion since you have the list?
Yeah, is that okay with you?
Is
Oh,
it
yeah,
okay?
sure.
Make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section 610.021, section 1, section 12 of the Missouri Sunshine Law. The meeting shall convene in closed session to discuss litigations and contracts, admitting myself, the board members, Darren Gordon, Matt Munslinger, Paul Trenhill, Courtney Harris, and Ethan Matchett.
Please
Andrew.
change that from Ethan.
Sorry. Andrew Patterson.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're in closed session, okay.